My name is Steve Brown. I'm with the Cantigny First Division Oral History Project. It is Monday, July 14th, 2008 at 2:30 p.m. We are at the University of Kentucky in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm here with Mr. Curtis Gilliland. Mr. Gilliland, can you spell your last name for us, please?
Gilliland.
And you served with the First Division.
That is right.
In the U.S. Army in Vietnam. How was it that you came into the military?
Well, I was draft age. I knew I was going to go in the military. I'd get a letter sooner or later. And I initially joined the Air Force. I was going to go to the Air Force. And I backed out. And so then I got a letter later on says from Mr. Nixon, President Nixon, invited me to join the Army, or to join him in the fight. And so I went.
Okay, and you were how old at the time?
I was 20.
You were 20 years old, so right. You were a couple years out of high school, or?
Right. I'd get out of the high school in 66. Went to college, University of Kentucky, for 2 years. And decided it wasn't for me at that time, and then I waited for the draft.
Where'd you grow up?
Somerset, Kentucky.
Okay. Tell me about your family. Mom, dad, brothers, siblings.
I got one younger brother, and my dad and mom, of course, raised us in the waters of Pittman Creek. I tell people that I'm much like Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. They don't have a thing on me because we grew up on the creek and camped out and fished, and my dad, of course, served in World War II. All my family on the Gilliland side had served in the Army, or the Air Corps at the time. And so it wasn't nothing for me to expect to go into service.
So your dad had served in the Army Air Corps in World War II? In
World War II.
And was that Pittman Creek?
Pittman Creek.
P-I-T-T-M-A-N?
P-I-T-M-A-N.
Okay, thank you.
Just outside of Somerset, Kentucky.
Okay. Farmers?
My dad was a carpenter contractor.
Okay. And where'd you go to high school?
Pulaski County High School.
Okay. What were you doing when you got drafted for employment, or?
I was working for the state of Kentucky as an engineer aide. In other words, we surveyed and built highways.
Okay.
And I done that up until the point of going into the service.
And when did you go in? When were you inducted?
November, I want to say the 20. No. That's when I went to Vietnam. June 24th of 68.
Okay. Where did they send you first?
Fort Knox.
What was that like?
It wasn't much for an old farm boy. I grew up running in cross country and track in high school, and I was in good shape, and I liked to get out and hunt and fish and all that. And then I was in good shape, went in the service, and kind of like a Boy Scout to me. Of course, had a little bit of different hours than Boy Scouts have. So it didn't bother me.
What did you think of your drill instructor?
I just accepted him. It's just part of growing up.
Okay, now you grew up in rural Somerset, Kentucky.
Right.
How much exposure did you have to non-whites in that area?
I had a little bit. There wasn't very many blacks going or living in, or went to school with me anyway. But the ones that I knew were good friends of mine. There was still discrimination. There was discrimination then. There was a restaurant. I remember years ago, my brother, Ernest, who's younger than me, of course, he had a good friend in Somerset who was black, and he went to one of the restaurants in Somerset. And he sat down at the restaurant, and the owner asked him to leave, asked the black man to leave, and told my brother he could stay. My brother says, "No, I will leave too." But I had no problem with it.
And this was when? When did Ernest?
That was probably in the 60s. I don't remember.
Okay. Before you went away or after?
Before I went away.
Okay. So getting along with Hispanics or African Americans was not a big issue for you when you got to...
No problem.
Okay. How long did it take you to complete your basic?
I believe it was 9 weeks.
Did you go to AIT or other advanced training after that?
Immediately went to Fort Polk, Louisiana for advanced infantry training, AIT. I believe it was 9 weeks down there.
What was that experience like?
It was much like the basic, a little bit more, a little bit rougher, but it didn't really bother me. Like some of the guys who come from maybe the cities or...
A little warmer in Fort Polk?
I say it was sand, pine trees, and rattlesnakes.
Okay.
And, it was an adventure, and I've always loved an adventure.
Huh. So going to Vietnam, was that an adventure for you, or how did you feel about that?
I was scared to death for 365 days, but I loved it.
Okay.
Now, that may sound crazy, but I love to travel, and I loved it. I loved the adventure in the countryside. Like I said, I grew up in the country. It wasn't like the country in Somerset, Kentucky, but it was farm people we associated with out in the country.
So you felt a kinship or a relationship to the farm people in Vietnam?
Yes, I think I did. I felt a...
How so?
Well, my grandfather was a farmer, was a Baptist preacher, and my father was, of course, a carpenter contractor, and they grew up in the country. And I could see that the country of Vietnam was so far behind, but it was... My grandfather probably grew up in about the same kind of conditions. Of course, it was in the United States, whereas they rode horses and now they're riding oxen in Vietnam. It's similar. I mean, they were growing corn in Vietnam. We grew corn in Kentucky. Where they grew tobacco in Vietnam, we grew tobacco in Kentucky.
Did you have a chance to observe their agricultural processes?
Oh, yes.
What did you think?
I thought it was beautiful. The rice fields and the greenery, and I was scared to death, but I enjoyed it. I was scared, terribly scared. I was afraid I was going to get shot, but it was something new every day.
Did you ever have interaction with the Vietnamese people while you were there?
The first contact I had with Vietnamese people that I can remember, that sticks out in my mind, is when I came in country right after Thanksgiving. And they had some type of battle outside of Junction City, NDP, night defensive position. And the sergeant had, it was 2 or 3 of us, he'd sent us outside the NDP to bury some Vietnamese soldiers who had been killed. And we went out and they'd been dead for 2 or 3, I don't know how long. They were on top of the ground, and so our job was to go out and bury them.
They were decomposing?
They were decomposing.
I've had some discussions with other veterans who said that the practice was not to bury the dead, in part to send a message to some of the villagers around. Do you know why you were burying those?
No, I just
bodies?
thought, well, I just accept it as natural. Someone dies here, we bury them. But I do remember burying them. We had sandbags full of dirt, and we'd walk by the bodies because they were smelling. And as awful as it may sound, we left the toe of one of the fellows sticking out of the ground. And that wasn't as foolishness on my part, our part. But that's my first contact with the Vietnamese.
Why was it foolish?
Well,
you guys just playing a joke, you mean?
Right, not to pay respect to the body. Even though there were Vietnamese, or Viet Cong or North Vietnamese soldiers, we should have still paid more respect to them.
How close were they to your NDP?
Oh, they were, and I'm guessing here, 150 feet.
Okay.
I don't know if they'd had a ground attack. I don't think they did. I think maybe they'd had some reaction and they'd shot them.
Let me back you up a little bit. Your first impression of Vietnam, you get off the plane. Well, where'd you go from Fort Polk?
I came home for a leave, and I forget how long it was, 25, 30 days. After the leave, I went to Fort Ord, California, outside of San Francisco, and went there to wait to get my orders for Vietnam. They gave us a day or two pass, and I remember this. very vivid, or it's it's in my mind. It's something I haven't forgotten. We went downtown San Francisco. We got on the trolley car there, the cable car, and some guy asked us, "Where are you going?" We told him where it's going, and we got ready to pay the toll. He said, "No, I'll pay the toll." Just a complete stranger. I don't know why I remember that, but it's always stuck in my mind.
Did you enjoy San Francisco?
Oh yes, I've been back several times since then.
Okay. So you were at Fort Ord. You're sent out to Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to ask the question: what's your first impression of Vietnam getting off the plane?
I can't remember much about it. Things were happening so fast after we landed. I know we landed at, I believe it was Long Binh. Stayed there a little while, then they took us by bus or truck to Zion, Vietnam. I just accepted it and didn't have any harsh feelings or mad feelings. Maybe that's not the correct word, but I just accepted and went on.
At what point were you able to start to stop and think and look around you and see the people, the agriculture, the things that you identified with there?
The first, and I'd been there about a month. And that's when I was in a ambush. I don't know if it's an ambush. We'd went out on patrol, and I'm sorry, I can't remember if it's a company or a platoon. We went on, that's Christmas Eve of '68. And we went out and set up. And then I can't remember the man's name. His name was Red, or nickname was Red, from California. Scambalone, I believe is what his last name, something like that. He and I went out and we were set up with a radio and a B-52 bomb crater. And that was an afternoon. And I always felt we violated the curfew because of the curfew going on at that time.
What was the curfew? Curfew
Christmas,
or a truce?
Maybe a truce.
Okay.
Probably a truce is a better word for it. And I always thought we violated the truce because there was a truce going on during Christmas. And the North Vietnamese and the communists were not supposed to move, and we weren't either, but we did. Anyway, we're in the B-52 bomb crater, and here comes some Vietnamese soldiers down the trail there. And I knew, and Red knew, that if we popped the ambush, we were in the B-52 bomb crater, and we were between the enemy and our buddies back. All someone had to do was just throw a hand grenade, and we were gone. So we let them go. And I told the CO that we'd spotted communist soldiers. He didn't believe me, so they called in the chopper and seen them floating down the river on a sampan. They didn't believe me. And that night, around midnight, they opened up on us, or we opened up on them. Somebody did. We were on the flat ground there outside of Junction City. They opened up, and in the process, I believe, I can't remember his name, he got shot in the foot. And we were laying down prone on the ground, of course, flat ground. And he got shot in the foot, and my head was beside his foot. And the next morning we got up, and there's still somebody out there alive, and he popped up and shot a pistol and got me in the finger. And then we searched the bodies, and I seen, you've seen the pictures of his family and their pictures and their billfolds, and I thought, this is no good, because they're just soldiers like us. They've got families, they've got kids, and it turned me off.
Do you remember what the pictures? Do you remember what you saw in those pictures?
It was some of the family. I don't remember what it was. But
of
the soldiers, I assume.
The dead Vietnamese soldier.
Yeah. And I thought, this is no good.
Why did you think this is no good?
I don't guess I really realized when I was going through the basic and AIT training that I was going to be fighting real flesh and blood. And I seen, of course, I had pictures of my family in my billfold, and he had pictures of it. And I thought, there's got to be a better way.
And this is a month after, if I'm right? You
Christmas Eve,
buried the dead?
2 or 3 days after I'd gotten there in Vietnam. And it may have even been a week. I can't remember right off. The one of the fellows with him, his name was Skip, and I can't remember his last name. He's in the book, Charlie Company.
The book by Mr. Goldblum.
But yeah, Peter Goldman.
Goldman, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
He and I and some others buried the guy with the sandbags.
Okay, so that's within about 2 or 3 days of getting in country.
Right.
You're wounded how much after that?
December 24th. So I got in country November the 23rd or 24th.
So it's roughly a month after.
Roughly a month.
So the act of burying these dead guys, dead bodies, didn't impact you as much as the second incident where you were involved in combat.
Right.
And then they took on a human sense to you.
Right.
Excuse me. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I run over my mind. I don't know. Maybe it may be the fact that I didn't have any part in the first one, and in the second I did have a part in the ambush and all that.
I'm sorry.
Before is somebody else had done it. Maybe that's it.
And you were returning fire in this ambush?
Right.
Let me walk back through this. You allowed this unit to pass through. You're separated from your unit.
Right.
Just you and another man in a crater.
B-52 crater.
They pass through. How long after that you receive an order to attack the next time, or how is it that fire was opened?
I don't know. It was probably 5-6 hours later. This is late afternoon when we were in the B-52 crater. We went out and set up, and we was in the B-52 crater. And the men came down the trail, and some say it's kids. I didn't say kids, but I've heard. But some came down the trail. We let them get by because we knew, like I said, hand grenade, we're gone. And the officer comes up and he says he's all upset because we let them get by. And then he calls Chopper in, and then that.
Why did you let them get by?
Well, like I said, if the communists were here, we were in the middle, we were in between our company, our unit, and the enemy. And all someone had to do, our side or their side, toss their hand grenade, and we're gone.
So it wasn't the sense of the truce so much that you were concerned about. It was your own personal safety. Firefight starts. How long did it last?
Gosh, I don't know. I can't remember. I know it started around midnight, and the next morning one fellow was still alive. One of the communist soldiers was still alive.
Where was he?
He was out in front of us, of course.
Wounded?
I assume he was, but he was able to fire.
Oh, he was still firing at that point.
That's what got me in the hand.
Okay. How did you guys deal with that situation?
Well, I think some of us felt the same, or some of the other guys felt the same way I did. We'd violated the truce by going out there. Maybe we hadn't, but I felt we had. And I think some of the other guys felt the same way. After it was over with, we were just happy to be alive.
Somebody shoot that one guy who was left there still firing?
I think they threw a hand grenade at him and got him.
Okay. So most of this fight happened in darkness?
Darkness.
So you don't know if you killed anyone?
No.
You know you fired, but you don't know if you killed. How did that strike you? Did you dwell on that at all?
No, not really. Like I said, I was scared 365. So many of our battles we fought with people we didn't see. We were in the jungle and you couldn't see just a few feet in front of you. So somebody opened up on you, you're walking through the jungle or the bush, and you get fire, you just hit the ground and start shooting. You can't see who you're shooting at. So you don't know if you've killed someone or wounded someone or what.
How many of these incidents do you think you went through in Vietnam?
Oh, I don't know, gosh. I never have. As far as getting fired at,
And returning fire and...
I don't, 40 or 50 maybe.
Okay.
And that may be 22 men maybe 29 up. I can't remember.
A couple times a month then?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least.
One time, it sticks out in my mind too. We were in the bush. We were on a path. We set up an ambush. And as I remember, it was a cross path. And I had the radio, and late in the night, and we were waiting for the enemy to come down the trail. And they came down the trail, and everybody was asleep except I think another fellow awake. And they came down the trail, and I could have reached out and grabbed them by the leg, and I let them get by because I knew also at that time also, if, as close as they were to us, and I didn't know how many were there, and most of the guys were asleep, with goners. So I just let them go on by.
So this happened to be the time that it was your turn to...
I was on radio watch.
Keep guard?
I think we had like 20 or 30 minutes, maybe a half an hour or something.
Half an hour of what?
Well, you'd pass the radio, the PRC-25, it'd pass the radio to you, and you would be on guard. You'd be laying on your stomach, normally, you'd be laying on your stomach, and I would be there with the radio for 30 minutes, and I'd pass it on to the next fellow, and we'd pass it on to the next fellow.
And then...
Go ahead.
What would you do? What were you doing before you got the radio?
I was probably sleeping too. You were dead tired most of the time when you got in the jungle, and you're fighting mosquitoes and trying to stay warm. I was probably sleeping. I'd wake the next fellow up, or he'd wake me up to, it's your turn for watch. Well, I thought I turned it off. I'm sorry.
What were conditions like?
Well, it was hot, except in those rainy nights down the stream somewhere. You'd get cold, but it was hot all the time. During the time walking through the jungle, we were sometimes we wouldn't walk a mile and walk all day long, cutting the jungle down. And sometimes we'd be on rice paddies and we could walk for several miles.
What did you have with you?
We'd have sea rations, our rifles, our ammunition, grenades, water. Our backpack, our blanket would use for the evening.
For a what?
For to sleep on, or blanket, just a poncho liner we'd call it. Or not a poncho liner, but just a blanket. Camouflage usually. And that's about all we'd have. Oh, unless we got goodies from the States. Mom, Dad sent candy or something of that type.
So how much weight are you carrying around?
Oh, I'd just be guessing. 40 or 50 pounds. The last part of my time in the field, I carried the ammunition for the M60.
The 60 millimeter machine gun?
60 millimeter. There was two of us, George Hesser and myself, and then the guy that ran the machine gun was Joe Box. And so we had it made up. If we got any action, we threw everything we had in front of us, and then Joe would open up the machine gun.
Okay. How many belts of ammo would you carry?
Oh gosh, been too long.
Okay. Let me ask you this. How much did you weigh when you got to Vietnam?
I believe 128 pounds. I think I had a 29 waist.
How much did you weigh when you got out of Vietnam?
Probably about 128 pounds.
Okay.
I didn't lose or gain very much. I was skinny before I went and skinny when I came back.
Okay. How'd your clothing hold up out there in the field?
It held up good. I think I changed boots 2 or 3 times or wore them out. I did bring my last pair of boots home with me. I've still got those.
3 pair of boots in a year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, we were sleeping in them. You know, we'd sleep in them, of course, walk in them. And
how about shoes, socks, shirt?
Socks,
shorts?
I don't remember really.
Did you ever get jungle rot?
Got jungle rot in the feet, yeah.
How many times that happened?
Oh, that happened a lot.
What did you do about it?
Well, I don't remember. We put some kind of medicine. The medic gave us some medicine, I'm sure. And we were to eat it very bad. We'd just sit back and let it heal up a day or so, then go back out in the field.
Where would you go back to?
I would go back to the camp where we initially set out from.
Junction City or?
Junction City or...
what other camps did you rotate through?
Well, the NDP's Night Defensive Division, they were, let's see, Junction City, of course, Thunder 1, Thunder 2, Thunder 3, Holiday Inn. There's one outside of Tonguin, I can't remember the name, it's right across the river from Benoit. And I can't remember any of the others. But I'll tell you a strange, kind of odd story. I've got a friend who's a missionary. He was there in '62 and through '75.
He was there from '62 to '75?
He and his family. He was a missionary, he and his 4 kids.
So he was there before all the hostilities broke out?
He was there with his family and was living out in the village. And I didn't know him at the time. But they pulled us in one time to patrol the area where he lived at. And we were welcomed with the grenades and the machine guns and all that. And here's an American living out there in the village that we had no idea he was living there.
Did you talk to him about that at all?
I did later. He's still a friend of mine. I stay in contact with him.
Wasn't he in some danger out there?
If not from the VC, from us, you know, we would shoot at anything move. We'd get a noise, we'd shoot. But he was in a village living with his wife and 4 kids.
Were his wife and kids, was his wife Vietnamese or was she American?
No, they're from South Carolina.
And, well, okay, you're out on these night ambushes. Did you ever have any experiences? You're firing into the bush. It's nighttime. You don't know what you're firing at. You ever have any situations where it turned out you had to wonder, were we hitting VC or North Vietnamese, or were we hitting civilians?
That's run through my mind countless times. After the fact, not at the time it didn't, because we took the orders. They said fire this way and fire that way, and we did. But after all those years of thinking, and like I said prior, I'd gone back many times. I've gone back to those same spots, and I see the houses and where they're located in relation to where we were at. And I'm thinking, we may have been shooting in houses and villages that...
You don't have any memories of actually doing that at the time, of discovering bodies or...
No, I don't.
Okay. Do the words accelerated pacification program mean anything to you?
No.
Okay. Do you remember some of the officers under whom you served?
Captain Arthur. There was I cannot remember the captain that come in right at the last part of my tour. He was a new fellow. I believe he was out of West Point. I may be way off base, but I remember
Not Captain Arthur, but...
the next fella. Okay. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name.
Captain Arthur was there when you got there?
I believe he was. I'm almost positive he was. Like, my memory is not that good. And talking to other vets, and our stories sometimes get intermingled. We think it's one person's another person and all that.
Okay.
But
what do you remember about Captain Arthur?
Seemed to be, well, he seemed to be a down to earth. One other fellow, the XO, and I can't remember his, Henderson. Major Henderson. He was from Kentucky. Now, I didn't meet him until I left Charlie Company in the field and went to Headquarters Company. And I can't remember the other. Kratz, I believe, Lieutenant Kratz was our lieutenant over our platoon.
Okay. What were your impressions of Captain Arthur again?
As I remember, he seemed like just a average nice guy. And I won't say his name was Arthur. I may be totally off, but I believe it's Captain Arthur. And that was the early part because we changed COs.
And Kratz?
Kratz was he seemed to be just like a big brother. But he was business and he wanted to take care of the fellas.
So these guys in your mind were good officers.
Right.
Do you have contact with any officers that you don't have such fond memories of?
Well, the last officer, the last captain we had, like I said, I believe he come out of West Point. I may be wrong, maybe Virginia Military Prep, but he was by the book, and he had to do it this way or that way. And then I remember them asking me or telling me to walk point, and I'd been there long enough in the country that you didn't walk down the roads. He asked me to walk point down the road, and I told him I wasn't going to walk down that road, that we'd walk alongside in the wood line, but not walk down the road, because I knew landmines, and here's a new man coming in, he wants to go by the book. And so some other fellow jumped up and said he'd walk point. Well, it wasn't long after that they were hauling him up in a helicopter. He got shot.
Who got shot?
The fellow that had volunteered to walk instead of me.
Oh, they were hauling him off on a helicopter. He'd been shot. I take it no land clearing unit had been down through that road?
No, we were back in the jungle, back in the bush.
Okay. And how did this officer respond to that?
I don't remember how his response was, what his response was.
How long had you been in country at that point?
Probably 7 or 8 months.
Okay, so you'd been in combat almost continuously during that time period, 7 or 8 months?
Most of the time, yes.
Okay.
We'd go out on patrol or we'd go out and ambush every night or every other night.
Okay.
We'd take turns going out. And
how long was this officer, were you in his company then? You would have had another 5 or 6 months, 4 months still in Vietnam.
I think 2 or 3 months I was in his company.
Did he come around?
It's coming around how as...
Well, your concern earlier was he did everything by the book. Did he adapt, I guess, is maybe a better word to use.
I think he did, and I'm just... I think he did. I really can't remember.
Okay.
But he wanted to go over the book, and you couldn't do that in the jungle.
Why not?
The war in Vietnam wasn't the war in Korea or World War II. You couldn't. Your enemy wasn't always right where you could see him, or it had so many booby traps and mines, and that you had to fight jungle warfare, not something that's come out of a book.
What sorts of skills did you have to have or develop in this warfare setting that weren't in the book, so to speak?
Well, the one, like I said, you didn't walk down roads because you knew you could be booby traps. 2 is you couldn't see your enemy, and you had to keep your look in the trees, and listen, smell. You can sometimes even smell the enemy at these night defensive positions by nighttime.
What would you smell?
They were high on pot or high on drug or whatever drug. You could smell them actually. I know we were at Junction City one time and we got the smell.
What happened?
Well, we knew where they were out there, and I don't remember if we fired or what, but they kept the soldiers high on drugs.
The Viet Cong or the NVA?
NVA.
Okay. When did you learn about that, or how did you learn about that?
I guess when I first went in the country, they told me that.
Somebody told you in your unit? Okay. You were wounded in the hand?
In the hand.
Okay.
Slight wound. The part of the bullet came out about 20 years ago.
Oh, it kind of finally kicked itself out?
Yeah.
What treatment and where did you receive your treatment?
Got it there in the field. It was just a slight wound.
Okay. The medic just took care of you?
Just took care of it. I think his name was Doc Cunningham, or his last name was Cunningham, I believe.
Okay. And you called him Doc because he was the medic. You received a Purple Heart for that?
Right.
Okay. You have any other wounds other than your finger?
I got a loss of hearing, partial loss of hearing. I got that by walking by some artillery one night, and they started shooting. I didn't realize they was going to shoot. They shot, and it deafened me for a while. I don't know, a couple of days. And the funny thing about it is that later on in the years, my wife would get after me for turning the TV up so loud. My wife and daughter would get after me and says, "Turn the TV down." Well, I decided to get my ear tested because I thought I could hear fine. So I came to the VA in Lexington, and they sent me over to one of the offices to examine me, and told them I thought I had good hearing, but they tested my hearing, and the lady asked me, says, "Were you around machine guns?" I said, "Yes." "Were you around grenades?" I said, "Yes." "Were you around artillery?" I said, "Yes." "Were you around helicopters?" I said, "Yes." "Were you around tanks?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "You come all the way to Lexington to ask me why you lost your hearing and you don't know?"
How much hearing loss did you have? Did they tell you?
It's classified as 10% disability.
Is it just one ear or both?
That's both ears. I have a constant ringing.
Oh, okay. Okay. Do you have any other memories of combat that you'd like to share?
Not combat. We were out in the field. And my last day, I remember this. My last day, we were setting up on another trail in the bush. And we were setting up in the late afternoon. And I looked across the trail in front of me. And here's two North Vietnamese soldiers looking me in the eye. And I'm looking them in the eye. And we're not 50, 75 feet apart. And I'm scared to death. And I'm running through my mind, here I'm going to get killed on my last day in the field. And I froze. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just froze. And I think he must have froze too. And one of my buddies, I don't remember his name, he seen me and looked across the trail, and he grabbed my gun and opened up on him. Well, he didn't kill him, but I thought I'm going to get killed on my last day of the field. And I looked him right straight in the eye. They looked me right in the eye.
How did you feel about that?
I was scared. I was terrified. It was running through my mind quick. You know, these people say that their life runs in front of them. Well, I thought I'm going to get killed on the last day. And just froze.
How did you know it was your last day in the field?
Well, they, excuse me, they gave me orders to reassign me to a headquarters company.
Okay.
I got shot, of course, in the hand Christmas Eve, and then got grazed across the nose earlier after that. And I guess the platoon sergeant or captain realized, 3 times, we better get this guy out of the field.
How was it that you got shot in the nose?
We were playing Cowboys and Indians. Basically, we were the Indians. We were circling a wagon train, and we were in tanks and APCs. And I was in the back of an APC with the lid raised up, and we were knocking the bush down around this base camp. And I stood up in the back of the APC, and one of the soldiers, communist soldiers, seen me evidently and shot, and he just come across my nose. And my sergeant was in the tank with me. He said, "I'll put you in for another Purple Heart." Well, I didn't care about the Purple Heart. I was just a scratch, not much more than if a thorn had caught you going through the woods.
Okay, you're about from your nose to your temple is maybe 4 or 5 inches.
Right.
Have you ever stopped and thought about
Oh, yes.
why or how that happened, that you got your nose grazed as opposed to something through your brain pan?
I've thought about it many and many times.
What do you think?
Well, I'm a firm Christian, and I believe that all things have a purpose. And it's kind of like, I believe I told you I go back to Vietnam quite often. The first time I went back, before I went back, I was deciding whether I had enough money to go. And I'm a retired mail carrier also. And I couldn't decide. And I looked down the ground, and here's a $100 bill laying on the ground in front of me. And I thought, there's a higher power than me that's controlling my life. And I thought about the bullet. There's a purpose. And I don't know what the purpose is, but I've experienced a lot since that first time I went into Vietnam.
We'll come back to that later. You come face to face with these two North Vietnamese soldiers. Your buddy saves you. What did you think about him after that?
Well, I just happy to be alive. I don't
Okay.
remember what I thought about him, but I,
Okay.
you know.
What was it like after having spent several months out in the bush, going back to a headquarters assignment?
Like being on vacation, you know, 24-hour vacation. There was no. We had moved at that time. At that time, when I went to headquarters company, we'd moved to Dao Ting, Yo Ting, and they had a large swimming pool there and a nice camp. And I was in charge of building some some hooches for the soldiers.
Hooch is?
Housing. Nothing basically more than sandbags and some tin over top of it. And Major Henderson, that I spoke about, is Kentucky, and then a boy from Tennessee and I kind of hung together, and so it's like, you know, I'm away from all the fighting now. I'm back here in a secure area.
Let me see if I understand. You and a guy from Tennessee hung together with Major Henderson?
Henderson.
You guys just kind of hung out. The three of you hung out together.
Right, because Henderson was from Kentucky, and then I believe his name is Kendricks. He's from Tennessee, and I was from Kentucky. Of course, we were all close. We all knew where each other's had been each other's town. We were Kentuckians in Tennessee, and we just kind of hung together. He was a major, and we were Spec 4s, specialists.
So there was no boundary between this officer and you guys as Spec 4s?
Oh, there was, in front of a group of people. Or in front of more officers or soldiers, but when we got together,
What did you guys do?
well, we just had a good time. We done what we wanted to do. I had a Jeep and I believe it was an old Cambodian man and a young Vietnamese boy. They were my helpers, whatever I wanted to do. I had a Jeep and I run around the camp there, and Henderson's, I believe his wife was in Thailand, and we answered to him, and he'd go take off and go to Thailand to see his wife, and Ron and I would just do our own thing. Something came up to me, a nail needed to be hammered. I'd done that. Ron was his Jeep driver, and I was, of course, kind of a battalion carpenter, I guess.
Okay. How long did that go on?
That went on for, I want to say, 2 months.
And then how long after that were you out of country?
I come out in November. I believe we went in 24th of November, and I come out, I believe it was 23rd of November. That's 69.
Okay. So the last 2 months you were there, you were in that headquarters assignment?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay. When you came home, were you posted anywhere?
I came home for leave, of course. I spent, I think, 30 days at home. Then went to Fort Carson, Colorado, and spent my remainder of my time there.
How much time was that?
That was from November to June of 70, so that would be about 7 months.
What were your impressions of the United States on your return?
I was happy to be back. Had a kind of a don't care attitude. I've done this, now I can. And we had a saying in Vietnam, where you going? And when we was over there, we get in trouble. We said, "What are you going to do? Send us to Vietnam?" Well, I already been to Vietnam, and so they had us on duty in Fort Carson, Colorado.
Did you have difficulty relating to other soldiers there who had not been to Vietnam?
Well, we'd treat them almost like Boy Scouts, you know. we had war stories, and we'd try to scare them or something like that. But we just counting our time. I went to a school, business school out there. They had an operation or transition. I can't remember the name of the program, but project transition maybe. So I went to Blair Business College there, and of course lived on base too.
Okay.
And,
you weren't married at this time?
No.
Single
no.
guy?
Mm-hmm.
When you went home for those 30 days, what was that experience like?
It was great. When I came home, my family were there at the end of the road with a big sign and welcomed me home, and it was November and I was freezing because I just come out of 95 and 100 degree weather. It's a good experience.
Did you run into any of your high school friends or neighbors?
Well, when I came home in November, of course I ran into my neighbors, my friends, and they, where you been? Some of them been to Indiana, never been in the military, but I came home and went back to Fort Carson, and my first cousin, who I grew up with there in Pittman Creek, same age as me, got killed on January 7th, 1970. So I immediately came back from Fort Carson and went to his funeral.
How'd that affect you?
It tore me up, because here's my best friend, my first cousin, I grew up with, went to school with, dated with, and he gets killed.
What thoughts ran through your head?
Just real sad. It bothered me for a while, but since then November last year, and then April this year, I climbed the mountain where he was at when he got killed.
In Vietnam?
In Vietnam.
Do you know the name of that location?
The name of the LZ Center. It's south of Da Nang, about 40 miles, way back out in the bush. We're the only, a friend and I were the only two, the first ones back at the top of the mountain since 73. We'd hacked the bush and went to the top of the mountain.
What effect did military service have on you?
Gave me, I guess, better respect and more of what this country is all about. But then again, like I said prior, when I seen that, we'd kill that fellow on Christmas, those people on Christmas, that gave me more, I think, a better feel in life, maybe a greater respect on life. Because the fellows we were fighting were men and women just like us, or brothers and sisters just like, they had brothers and sisters, they had moms and dads, and they had kids. And Vietnam turned me into a pacifist, I guess I want to say.
How would you characterize yourself before you went?
Gung-ho. They asked me when I went into Fort Knox, I remember this, they said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go in the First Infantry Division, I want to be a big red one, and I want to get a Purple Heart and a combat infantry badge. Well, I got all three of them. They would tell us this: you ask for something, they'll give you entirely opposite. So I asked for to go into First Division, Purple Heart, and a combat infantry badge, never thinking I'd get it.
Why'd you ask for First Division?
I just heard about it and read about it, and
So you knew a little bit of the history of the Big Red One before you went in?
I knew just a little bit. It could have been the 2nd Division, it could have been the 4th Division, but...
What did you know?
Very little. Just, okay. I've probably seen it in a movie or something, seen something referring to the 1st Division.
What was your impression of the 1st Division after you got there?
Very organized. Of course, I'd never been in a 196 or the Murray-Cal, or so they could have been just as good as our division was. But I have great respect for the 1st Division. The guys, the soldiers that I was around, they took care of you. They were buddies. And like the the major and the boy from Tennessee. I just had great respect for it once they got there, more so.
When you're in combat, out in the bush, when you're walking point, I'm assuming you walked point on occasions other than that incident on the road.
Very seldom did I walk point.
Is there a reason for that?
No, I think some of the fellows actually wanted to walk point. But
Why would they want to walk point?
I don't know, because when you go in the jungle, that's the first one they usually got. Or they'd walk through maybe the enemy base camp, and then once they walk through, then they open up. I don't know.
Life expectancy was kind of low for a point man, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In combat, what's your motivation? Why are you doing these things that normally you would think, I wouldn't do this in a million years? Why would you do that?
I guess because they were shooting at us when we'd shot at them. We just automatic. We was trained in basic and trained in AIT to fight back.
Okay. You went to Fort Carson. You hung out a little bit in Somerset before you went to Fort Carson.
Right.
You run into people in town. What were their attitudes towards you?
I never had any negative attitudes at all that I can remember. It's just the World War II vets, that age of that generation, that just accepted that you went in Somerset, Kentucky. That's Army call. You went in the Army, and so this stuff I read about, where that they have all this conflicts they had in California and protests. We just accepted it. I just accepted I was going in the service, and Vietnam wasn't really, as I remember, anyone argued.
Did you see that kind of thing on television or read about it in the newspaper?
Then at that time,
the conflicts, yeah.
I probably did. The only real conflict I can remember is when I was in high school, before I went into service. My history teacher, who was born in China, who I loved to listen to, had us debate. And one of the supposed smartest girls in the class, she and I debated, and I can't remember which side I debated, which way I was pushing, go to Vietnam or get out of Vietnam. But I know I beat her in the debate. But that's really the only conflict that I can ever remember.
Okay.
I did when I came back. The funny thing is, when I came back from Vietnam, came home, went to Fort Carson. They had a protest march out there, and a few of us got in the protest march, and here we were, active duty soldiers. We walked to the draft board. And
so you participated in a protest march?
Right.
Why?
Because at that time I was against going and fighting in Vietnam.
Okay. You mentioned some of the things that caused you to do that in your view of humanity. Were there specifics about Vietnam and that war itself that you felt you should protest?
For the kids and the older people and the soldiers, like I was telling you at Christmas. It just never sunk in that these were human beings. I'd been taught through basic and AIT, these were the enemy, and I was supposed to shoot at the enemy, in which I participated in that. But once I seen that in Christmas, it changed my mind. Though I did continue through the war, firing. But when I came back, I had the freedom to express myself, whereas I couldn't over there.
So this was more a function of your view of human versus human relationships as opposed to the justness of this war. Is that a fair way to characterize it?
I think so.
Okay. You went out and you participated in this protest. Did you get in any trouble?
No.
Did anybody know about it back at the base or at Fort Collins?
Fort Carson.
Yeah.
There was a couple of us guys. I don't know. Of course, we weren't in uniform at the time. We marched down to the draft board, and I don't remember. They may have been 1,000, may have been 10,000. I don't remember. But the funny thing, and they were going to stay there all night in front of the draft board. And we went back a few hours later, and everyone was gone. So their protest wasn't.
You went back a few hours later. Did you have to leave?
No, we left the protest because the marchers were going to protest and sit down in front of the draft board. And so we left.
Why?
Not because, well, we were just, I don't remember why we left, but we left thinking those people were going to sit there and wait in front of the draft board. But we went back 2 or 3 hours later, and they were going to stay there all night. Went back 2 or 3 hours later, and everyone was gone.
What'd you think about that?
Well, I thought it was kind of childish. If he was going to protest, they should have said, like he said.
Do you know if they got chased off or arrested?
No,
or?
no, I don't know.
Okay.
Don't have it.
Did you have any particular thoughts or feelings towards the anti-war movement at that time?
Not that I remember.
Did you ever participate in any more protests or anything like that?
No, that's the only one.
Okay. So you went back home to Somerset.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. Did any of the people in the march with you know that you were on active duty?
Well, there was a couple of guys with me, but I don't remember what their names were. They were active duty military like myself. And there may have been other soldiers in that march.
Okay.
But of course they weren't wearing the uniforms.
But you didn't know if any civilians knew?
No.
Did they say negative things about the military?
They were protesting the Vietnam War and the draft and all that. I don't remember all the words and was said, but I do remember they was going to stay there all night long. Of course they didn't.
I guess I'm hearing something that it's interesting to me, because you've got these guys that you're serving with that you've counted on, and they're in the Big Red One, and you were in battle with them, you counted on them, you were tight with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have these people here who've never been in combat before, don't know what it's like, and they're bad-mouthing the military. How does that fit together?
Well, they were all kids. I mean, they're young people. I don't really know what was running through my mind at that time, but I knew I was getting out of the service. Maybe it just is happening, and I was come by and decided one. I can't remember my feelings at the time, other than the fact that I was against the war.
How much longer were you in service after that?
That demonstration was probably in March and April, and I got out in June, following June.
So, 2-3 months?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Did you ever have, when you had interaction with civilians, did you ever run into people who had negative attitudes towards the military or towards Vietnam outside of that protest march?
Not that I can remember. The only experience, the experience that sticks out is when I came back and I was out of the military, and I went to my job. And
where was your job?
I was with an engineer aide for the Kentucky State Highway Department. And I went back to my job, and I was supposed to get all the raises and all the things that I'd missed out in 2 years. And when I went back to my job, they didn't give me those raises and all that. And when I protested, some of the guys in that outfit, or the engineer aid group, were aggravated because I was getting a raise after being gone 2 years. And they had never served in the military.
Did you end up getting the raise?
I got the raise. Okay. Yeah.
Did you mention to them, my life was on the line?
Well, I'm sure it did.
What about yours?
I'm sure it did. But not the funny, but they both got, later on in life, got high political jobs in the county.
Okay. Did you have any adverse after effects after being in combat?
No, I've never had any problem.
You have difficulty sleeping at night?
No.
Nightmares?
No, never had the first nightmare.
Okay. He's going to have to rewind that. We'll put another tape in, and I'd like to ask you some questions about going back to Vietnam.
Okay.
And the return. Okay, Mr. Gilliland, you came back, you went to work for the Highway Department. How long did you stay there?
Went back November, I'm sorry. Went back in June, and I resigned in February of 71. Yeah, February of 71.
Took a job with the U.S. Post Office?
Right.
In Somerset?
Right.
Why did you do that?
Well, I'd taken the test before I went in the service, and I'd passed it. And then I came back out of the service course, worked in the Highway Department. I knew it was a better paying job than Postal Service. And I got 10 points because had a Purple Heart. And so I applied for it and got the 10 points. And, you know, I feel at that time the reason, not because I probably went to the top of the list because I had a Purple Heart, but I think they were hiring vets to fulfill the 10% or the 5% they're supposed to fill, and so I was one of the guys one of those 10% or what they're supposed to hire.
And how long did you work at the post office, or do you still work at the post office?
I retired almost 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years ago this coming November.
You had a rather formative experience involving a Vietnamese person at the post office. Is that right?
Right.
Would you like to tell us about that?
The postmaster, who I deeply respect, his name is John Tohill. And one day I was in the back, and he came running back of the post office. Said, "Can anybody speak Vietnamese?" And I said, "I can speak a few words." He said, "There's a lady up here sitting on the floor. She's been sitting on the floor squatted down the floor in the lobby of the post office."
About when was this? Do you remember?
This was probably, I'm guessing, 73 or 74. May even been earlier than that. But I know it was after 71 when I got hired. And so I went to the front with Mr. Tohill, and he had her sitting at his desk, and he couldn't communicate with her. So I found out the only reason she came to the post office because she'd seen the American flag, and she knew in Vietnam she'd seen the American flag. There was aid, there was help. So she married a soldier. He had left her at a trailer in Somerset.
An American soldier.
American soldier, and he got assigned to Okinawa. And he left her. He was going to leave her there in Somerset, and he was going to Okinawa. And at times he would leave her in that trailer prior to going to Okinawa by herself, and she got scared. And so she was out wandering. She seen the American flag come to the post office, and Mr. Tohill. She ended up in Mr. Tohill's office, and I found out through other communication she could speak a little bit of English. And so at that time, the county judge, who's my cousin, I took her down to him, and they helped her out. But she later on she was a mental case. She's had mental problems and got killed by a car while walking alongside the highway.
Why? Okay, did you do anything after you took her to the judge? Did you do anything else to help her out?
Not that I remember.
Okay.
But in 75, I was going to college. Of course, I used a GI Bill, and I was going to college, and I had a friend. Where
were you going to college?
University of Kentucky,
okay.
Community College in Somerset.
Okay.
And I have a friend who's a Catholic nun, and she knew I'd been to Vietnam. And the church there in Somerset had agreed to sponsor 4 Vietnamese men.
Which church?
First Baptist Church in Somerset. And so she asked me if I'd have help. And so she knew, like I said, she knew I'd been to Vietnam, and I said, sure. That was in 75, and so from 75 I've been working with the Vietnamese. My wife's cut the umbilical cords. I've bought houses, bought cars, bought tickets, raise your kids for school. It's just like you'd maybe do your own son or daughter. So.
Why do you do that?
I've thought about that. I've wondered about that. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder maybe if I'm not trying to make up for what I did in Vietnam, or what we did in Vietnam. That might be a big part of it, maybe. But I do know I love the Vietnamese people, and I've become very close, or very attached to them.
These people were in Somerset, Kentucky.
Right.
You ever go to Vietnam?
I was in Vietnam in April, or March and April this year, and I made
2008.
2008, and then I went twice last year. I made about 20 trips.
You've been to Vietnam 20 times.
Yeah, you just spent a month.
Do you ever go back to the places you were at? Junction City?
Oh yes. I've gone to Junction City and Lai Kay, Dao Tieng, Tay Ninh, Cu Chi. I've been just virtually everywhere when I was serving there.
What's that like for you?
It's the best feeling in the world.
Best what?
It's the best feeling in the world, because 68 and 69 we were scared of getting shot or killing someone else. And to walk, we couldn't walk down the trails, or we had to walk to the side. And now to go back and be able to walk down those trails and those roads without any fear, and to see kids and grandma and grandpa out there working without having to worry about getting shot. It's a tremendous feeling.
Have you ever met anybody against whom you would have fought?
Oh yeah, I've met several. Matter of fact, well, I don't think he was actually old enough, but one of my Vietnamese friends who fought for the South, his brother is a Vietnamese communist officer today. Several years ago, we went and played pool together.
Here or over there?
Over in Vietnam. So here we are. I'm a ex-U.S. soldier, and here's a Arvin, ex-South Vietnamese soldier, and here's a communist officer, and we're playing pool together.
Conversations ever come up about
No.
the war?
No, not that I was in. It's in March this year. I went to a place called Cantigny, out in the mountain yards where the mountain village people are, and they had a party there, and they invited us there. And that's ex-North Vietnamese soldier. He'd packed no telling how many pounds down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and here's another South Vietnamese soldier, and here I am, riding a motorbike, and we had a good.
You ever experience any hostility?
Never.
Why do you suppose that is?
I don't know. I think we Americans would be different. I think we would. But I have, like I said, I've made about 20 trips. I've never had a bad experience. I've never experienced hostilities against me, or I was sitting in the park several years ago in Saigon, and at that time, and probably still so, go in the park and sit down, and college kids or high school kids would run up to you and want to talk to you because they could practice their English. It's just after Columbine, and this young man and I were comparing our countries. And I was telling him what was bad as his country, and he was telling me what was bad in my country. And then he said, "But in your country, kids are killing kids in school." And I stopped. He had me.
When you go there, does anybody attach a minder to you? Are you limited on where you can go?
I've never been told I couldn't go here or go there or stay here. I've stayed in the villages. I've stayed in the homes. I've stayed in the hotels. I've walked the mountains. I climbed this mountain twice. And
the mountain where your cousin was killed?
The mountain where my cousin was killed.
What was that like for you?
Of course, the first trip was in October. I can't remember, October or November last year. I've been back so many times, and I've been back in the bush and been back in the mountains, but never been here before. Really didn't have any great feelings on it, but I knew I was climbing. I was going where my cousins were at, or where my cousin was at, and he got killed. I've never had any deep thoughts on it, but I just going back to where he was at.
You say you can't. I'm going to do something here in terms of time frame. Your cousin was buried in Somerset when you were at Fort Carson.
Right.
And you came home from Fort Carson and attended the funeral.
Right.
Was that before or after the protest?
I believe it was the funerals. Let's see, that's before, because he was killed on January 7th, 2000 or 1970, 70 or 71, 71, I believe. Yeah.
Do you suppose? So the funeral precedes the protest.
Mm-hmm.
Do you suppose there's any connection there?
Probably. Yeah, I can see how a person could assume that. I probably would.
Okay. Perhaps motivated the march for you?
Probably added to the feelings of how
the
I felt
existing motivation
yeah.
that was already there. You've helped a lot of Vietnamese people over here. You got a gentleman coming this week
mm-hmm.
to stay at your house. You want to tell us about that?
His name is Samuel Trung. He just worked and got the first Gideon camp in Vietnam since 1975. It was established this past December the 3rd, 2007, the first camp. And I was very fortunate and able to have lunch with him and meet him a couple times, him and a few of the camp. And we developed a friendship. And he's come to Louisville, Kentucky for International Convention of the Gideons. And he's going to come in my home and stay for 4 days, 4 nights. And to me, that's remarkable that we got a new Gideon camp in Vietnam for the first time since 1975. That's remarkable. But one of the other remarkable things, maybe even on a higher plane, is that I was in the Easter services this year. The first time this church has had Easter services without government oversight in 32 years.
In Vietnam?
In Vietnam.
You were at Samuel's church?
I would know I was at Grace Baptist Church. Okay. The Grace Baptist Church is, you remember I spoke about the man in missionary who lived there
yes.
in 62? This is the church he had started. And they suffered persecution for what's in 75.
He had remained in country?
No, he left in 75, but the church went on.
Okay.
The pastor, Pastor Chung, had stayed there, and they'd suffered persecution all those years. They threatened to throw his son in jail. But now the government has said, no, you can take your church and go throughout the country. But I was in the Easter service, the first Easter service, without government oversight. It'd be since 75, 33 years.
Just this past Easter.
Mm-hmm.
So Samuel will be coming here and he'll be going back.
He'll be coming Wednesday in Louisville, we'll be in Louisville. Then he'll come to my home in Somerset, or I'll pick him up in Louisville, and he'll stay there, then go back to Louisville for the convention and be there for a week.
Have you ever had any Vietnamese? You've had a number of people who were living in the United States from Vietnam stay with you.
Right.
Have you ever had Vietnamese nationals who will be returning to Vietnam? Have you ever had them stay with you?
This is the first time.
It's the first time. What do you think you two will have to talk about?
I don't know. He's 53 years old. I think he's a grandfather like myself. Of course, we're both Gideons. He's new to the Gideon. He's a new Gideon. I've got several Vietnamese friends that want to meet him, and I think we'll hit it off. I think we'll be okay. He seemed like a real nice fellow.
You know, on that note, that is a great note. But I don't want to walk out of here not having discussed something that you would think is important to discuss, or something that you think we need to get on tape that perhaps I have overlooked. Is there something that you want to share with us that I haven't questioned you about or we haven't touched on?
I remember one thing that happened, and it's maybe very minor. When I first got in country in Vietnam, you had orientation. and you went down, all the new soldiers, and went down, and they had a chaplain or pastor or priest, I don't know what he was. And he told us, he said, this will be the greatest year of your life. And I thought, this man's crazy. And it was the greatest year of my life.
Why was it the greatest year of your life?
It brought me to, I can understand more so what life's all about. A greater appreciation for life.
Your life, other people's lives?
My life and other people's lives.
Well, thank you very much for being here today, and thank you for your service to the country.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks, fellas.